Sorry guys, you spooked me there. Don't you know better to do that these days? I mean, come on, there's zombies running around, there's Russians falling from the sky, there's dogs and cats living together. It's mass hysteria out here. Well, now that we got a minute, as you can see, we are still going strong on our zombie series of videos. Now, last time we talked about building the ultimate zombie rifle and what are some of the most important things you can have on that rifle. And I touched on this a little bit in that video, but we're going to go a lot more in depth today on gear. Now, having the proper weapon for a zombie apocalypse is very, very important, and it could easily save your life. But just as important, if not more important, is choosing your gear and choosing what you are going to take with you going into the zombie apocalypse. Now, I mentioned last time that we're basically basing this a lot off of The Walking Dead. It's one of my favorite series. Now, one of the biggest problems we see in The Walking Dead is nobody really puts any thought into their gear except for one or two characters that, of course, managed to survive the entire series. In the very early days, the first season, let's say, a lot of the people are just running around with whatever they could grab off the back of the shelf or grab off of the RV or out of the back of a car. That's not a good situation to be in, unless you are someone who has prepared for this kind of situation and you have set gear aside, set aside supplies, ammo, all these things to be able to just grab and go at a moment's notice. It is a very, very bad situation if you are left running into a zombie apocalypse or an apocalyptic hellscape with only what you can grab out of the pantry, out of your car, out of your bedroom, out of the closet, whatever, and just have to fend for yourself. So today we're going to talk about a few things that you should have on your person, or at least ready to go, in the event of a zombie apocalypse. Now before we get started, I can already hear the people screeching in the comments section. No, this is not a definitive list of things that you have to have in your pack, because there is no such thing. As you can see, I live out in the Missouri backwoods, so the things in my pack and the things on my person are suited to my environment, to my terrain, to the weather conditions of the time period that I happen to be in right now. Now, this is going to depend on where you live, what your terrain, what your conditions are as to what you should have in your pack and what you should have in your zombie loadout. Operation and terrain always dictates what you take with you. So, if you live in a mountainous area, you're going to need a lot more warm weather, or cold weather gear rather. If you live in a desert area, so the first thing we're going to talk about is the 3 levels of gear. Now you're going to hear this all across the internet, especially here on YouTube with a bunch of former military or law enforcement or prepper types that offer videos similar to this one. Now, the 3 levels of gear are first line, second line, and third line. First line being what you have on your literal person. That is going to be your clothing, what you have in your clothing, in your pockets and such, and whatever you can have on you without having to put any more gear on. Now, typically, you would have your dip pockets. In the case of the clothing I have on right now, I have on some hunting camo. Now, I'm wearing hunting camo instead of military fatigues for a couple of reasons. One, it's cheaper. Everybody can afford this stuff. I mean, this set was about 50 or 60 bucks for the shirt and pants, and they have held up really well. I got a couple sets of this stuff. Two, since it is not an active military camouflage, it doesn't instantly align you with one group or another if someone just spots you from a distance and thinks, oh no, that's a good guy, or oh no, that's an enemy, or what have you. It blends in very well with my environment, and again, this is going to depend on your terrain and your conditions, but out here, this stuff is awesome. I think this was literally made for the Ozarks because it has gotten me a lot of deer over the years. Now, went off on a little tangent there. Clothing like this actually has a lot of pockets. I have 2 chest pockets, I have 2 pockets down here, I have 4 pockets, actually 6 pockets on the breeches. You can't really see it because of where the camera sits, but that offers a lot of cargo space for carrying miscellaneous items such as pocket knife, tools, mapping utensils, navigation utensils, gloves, food, medical. I mentioned this before in the rifle video. Medical is always a must. If you are going to have one thing on your first line gear, in your pockets, in your dip pockets, whatever, have medical. have some kind of Celox or Quick Clot, some kind of clotting agent to stop a bleed if you need to, have a tourniquet on you somewhere where it is handy. I got one in my dip pocket right now, so that you can just grab and go, slap it on yourself, slap it on a buddy. Let's say you have a Walking Dead situation where your buddy just got bit in the arm, and the only way to save his life is you have to cinch that thing off, grab Michonne's sword, and hack that sucker off right there on the spot, otherwise he's going to turn in the next 5 minutes. This is where a tourniquet comes in very handy, because 1, you've stopped the infection, 2, once that limb comes off, well, now he's bleeding because you just cut his frickin' hand off. So now you are stopping the bleeding, you are saving his life twice over. Also, another thing, I mentioned navigation equipment a minute ago. One of the most important things to have on your first line gear is compass. This is one of the most often overlooked, but one of the most life-saving tools you can have in a situation like a zombie apocalypse or a Mad Max apocalypse situation where the grid is down, there's no GPS, there's no cell phones, there's no computers, no internet. The world has gone back to the Stone Age, and now you are back to bare bones basics. Because with this little tool, and maybe a map square, and a decent knowledge of navigation, you can find your way anywhere you want to in the world. For hundreds and hundreds of years, this was the gold standard for navigation, be it on land or sea. Because with one of these, this is a military-style Lensatic compass. Yes, it's missing the little glass piece up here. It's supposed to have a crosshair up here so you can find a landmark and shoot an azimuth. I lost that a few years ago on a field training exercise, and I have no idea where it went, but the compass still works. Basically, I'm going to give a quick and dirty lesson on this. The way you would use this, you look through this little eyepiece right here, find yourself a landmark somewhere in the distance, and you shoot a bearing or an azimuth, whatever you want to call it. Then you look through this little eyepiece down here, and it has a series of numbers. That's going to be your degrees. Let's say I'm navigating off of that giant cedar tree over there. I'm going to put a sight on that tree, find it on my compass, look through my eyepiece. That's about 140-ish degrees. Now, if I start walking in that direction and I periodically check my compass, as long as I am on that bearing, I'm going in a straight line, I know exactly where I'm going. Now, if I can dig in my pack over here and pull out some maps of my local area, maybe one of those statewide atlases that you used to see at Walmart and all these other stores all the time, but then GPS took over, you hardly ever see them anymore. If you got one of those for your state, you are golden. And you're planning on going on, let's say, a long-haul trek like Rick and the gang did on Walking Dead, where they went from Georgia to Virginia in about, 5 minutes, even though that could have been a show unto itself, but I digress. If you're planning on going on a trip like that, compasses are an absolute must, maps are an absolute must, and if you can get your hands on some military or USGS maps, the ones that have the grid squares on there where you can properly navigate with a compass and map square, oh boy, you are golden. That is a zombie apocalypse GPS right there. If you have the skills to read those maps and the know-how on how to use the compass, the map square, and all these other tools to your advantage, you can go basically anywhere you want. Also, another good thing to have on your first line gear, gloves. Gloves are good for many, many situations. If you're in a stressful situation, your hands are sweaty, gloves. If you're trying to pick up something cold, hot, or sharp, gloves. If it's getting a little nippy outside, let's say it's this time of year. Right now it is a very comfortable 65 to 70 degrees. This morning it was about 40 degrees, and tonight it's probably going to be 40 degrees again, so it's going to get a little chilly. So if I got some gloves to keep my hands warm, that's awesome. And also, if I dig into my pack, into my extra set of clothes, I have a whoopee and I have a poncho in there. Awesome. Now we're going to get to the pack in a little bit. I brought it up a couple of times now. Now, moving on to the second line gear. That is going to be what you put on your person other than clothing. That is, in this case, it's going to be my chest rig, my battle belt, in other cases, my plate carrier, and whatever. Actually, no, third line gear would be the pack. Never mind. I digress. Now, you may be wondering, why is he rocking a chest rig for a zombie apocalypse loadout instead of, say, a plate carrier? I mean, come on, it's the friggin' zombie apocalypse. Why wouldn't you want the maximum amount of capability out of your gear? Well, there's a couple reasons for that. One, plate carriers can be very bulky and they can be very conspicuous. Now, if you are running around a zombie apocalypse, let's say post-apocalyptic Atlanta in the show, and you are perched up on a roof and you're looking out for bad guys and you're capping Z's from up there on that roof like Merle does, if you see somebody in a plate carrier, what do you automatically think? You think threat, and you think authority figure. Now, this is kind of irrelevant in a situation where people are just running around trying to survive, but at the same time, it does have a little bit of merit. Also, the weight. Depending on what kind of armor you got in there, that could really, really slow you down. If you're rocking the old school steel plates, which I absolutely despise, you got 20 pounds of dead weight on you right off the bat before you hang anything else off of it, before you put a pack on your back. That is dead weight that you don't need. There's a fly on my camera. Get off of there. Come on. Sorry about that. But that is just 20 pounds of dead weight that you don't need. You got polyethylene plates like I have in my plate carriers. Well, that's a different story. Now you've got about 12 pounds of dead weight. Much, much better, but you still have some weight on you. If you're playing a game where the name of the game is speed, 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 I mean, like Columbus says on Zombieland, get off of there, fly. But like Columbus says on Zombieland, number one rule of Zombieland, cardio. Cardio means running. You can't run effectively if you are weighed down like a pack mule. Now, I know there's all these guys out there that are former military saying, well, I ran 5 miles and on my full kit, if you can't do it, you won't survive. Well, that's nice. You were in a controlled environment. You weren't being chased by zombies 24/7. Not trying to downplay what you guys did. Y'all are awesome. I salute you. But at the same time, if you can have the capability to run something lighter, something slimmer, something that you can potentially ditch at a moment's notice if you really want to and not feel bad about it, chest rigs are the way to go. Not only that, but chest rigs can actually hold a very interesting amount of ammunition. This particular build that I've made for myself, I can hold 4 rifle mags, 2 pistol mags, and I can stuff a couple more in these admin pockets and mat pockets in the back, if I really want to. Now, I believe T-Rex Arms just came out with a new one that has 4 pockets across the front, and they can double up, so you can actually have 8 magazines up there. Some chest rigs these days come where you can build them up yourself. You can have all the ammo you want on there. You can just go hog wild with it, although I wouldn't recommend it, because in the case of a chest rig, as opposed to a plate carriers have weight on the front and back, so they kind of balance you out. Chest rigs, all the weight is up front, so if you load that sucker down with ammo and gear, you're going to be walking like this all the time, and your back is going to hate you. Now, of course, if you're being chased by zombies, maybe a moot point, but I digress. So in this case, I can have 4 rifle magazines and 2 pistol magazines. In my case, I carry 1911. Yes, I know, go ahead and insult me. I got 16 rounds of ammo right here, and 3, 6, 9, 12, 120 rounds of rifle ammo, plus what's in my rifle and what's in my pack. So that's a pretty decent amount of ammunition. If I run into a horde of zombies, I've got 120, actually no, 150 chances to take down as many zombies as I can. And as I said in my zombie rifle video, if you've got the proper training and you know how to operate a firearm in the correct way and you can actually place those shots on target, potentially that's 150 dead zombies if I really want to and I want to use up all my ammo. Or, if we've survived into the 3rd or 4th season and now we're fighting saviors and raiders, well, that's a couple of dead raiders I've just saved myself or my comrades. Now, in that situation, it's kind of different because instead of putting those well-placed shots on zombie heads, now you're engaging in gunfights, which means there's going to be a lot of wasted ammo, a lot of potential for you to be injured and somebody else to be injured. You really want to disengage as soon as possible in those kind of situations. Now, going back to why we're rocking a chest rig in a zombie apocalypse for weight and speed. If you talk to anybody that has gone down range over in one of the many places we've been fighting for the last 20 or so years, if you ask somebody who's been on any kind of reconnaissance trip, or any kind of recon mission, someplace where stealth and speed are the name of the game, they'll always go for a chest rig. Very rarely, depending on the situation, depending on the terrain, will they ever go for a plate carrier. In fact, they will go for the lightest, slimmest build they can possibly have. Just a chest rig, a pack, and what they can stuff in their pockets. Why is that? Well, again, weight, speed, and also noise. Plate carriers are rigid. They don't have a lot of give to them. So if you're trying to creep up on something and they brush up against something, they are much more likely to make noise. Also, since you have all this weight on you, it's going to fatigue you faster. That means you get careless. That means you make a lot more noise. And in a zombie apocalypse where every footstep could mean death, especially out here where we have a carpet of dry leaves, I mean, you can't take 3 steps no matter how careful you are without making noise. But you can mitigate that noise as much as possible by wearing light, efficient gear. Now, going to the battle belt. You can't really see it here. Let me back up a little bit. There we go. On this belt I have 1 rifle mag, 1 pistol mag, a multi-tool, my handgun. Around my back here I have my knife. Also I have a dump pouch, and I'm just going to turn around here. Also a med pouch right there. Now, if I was operating alone in a zombie apocalypse, that med pouch is not very well placed, because if I have to treat myself, I gotta take the belt off, or I gotta get a rip off, and I gotta rip that thing off of my belt in order to treat myself, or a buddy. Ideally, that placement is for your regular old tactical drills where you're always gonna be working around a friend, and if you go down, That is your individual first aid kit, IFAK. It is for you, not anyone else. That means that if, say, I go down, my buddy is going to run over to me after he finishes or disengages from the bad guys, and he's going to use my med kit to treat me, not himself. I'm not going to use it to treat myself, short of grabbing one of my tourniquets and slinging that sucker on. That is for you, you alone. So if you're going to be operating by yourself, you may want to rethink the placement. May stick it up here on your chest rig, maybe off to the side. If you are rocking a plate carrier, somewhere on your cummerbund where you can get to it with either hand, maybe just move it around on the belt so it's a little more accessible. But I digress on that point as well. So, that's covering first line gear and second line gear. Let's move on to third line gear, which could arguably be the most important part of this loadout. Alright, so here we have our pack that we're going to be using for this particular video. Now this is nothing special, this is just, you know, a Bass Pro special, got a little bit of camo on it, just stuff to hide you in these backwoods. And really, this is something that every person can afford and every person can afford to put together. Most of this stuff came either from Walmart or Bass Pro. Also, this is kind of a minimalist setup. If you're going to be out for an extended period of time, you are going to want something more akin to a mountaineer's kit or a military pack that has a lot more storage capacity, a lot more capability than this. But for the purposes of this video, this will work. This is actually one of my get-home bags. I keep this in my car most of the time, so it contains supplies that I might need if I have to abandon my car for any reason. Let's say, I don't know, electromagnetic pulse, severe weather, civil unrest, the zombies are rising from the grave and they're marching down the highway in hordes. I don't know. So, what do we have in this pack that could keep us alive for an extended period of time? Well, let's find out. You may have noticed it. Right off the bat, Gerber machete. These things are awesome. I have had this particular one for going on 20 years now. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a lot of dirt, a lot of wear and tear on that blade. This sucker has been all around the country with me, and it has served me very well on many, many occasions. Now this can serve as a tool. You can see it has the straight blade, also this really gnarly looking saw blade. I've cut down many, many young saplings and a lot of firewood with this. Now this can be used as a very good brush clearing tool. Cut your way through shrubs, cut your way through brush, cut down firewood, cut down stuff to make a shelter. You can do camp chores with it. Also makes a fairly decent weapon. Now, The Walking Dead kind of exaggerates the capability of this as a weapon. You always see Rick and the gang taking big, long swings at these things and burying these into zombie skulls. These blades are not as good as the show makes you think. Now, it's not to say they're not a good blade. They're an excellent blade. But just the way these things are made, they are made more for work than for fighting. So they're not the greatest thing in the world to cleave a zombie's head off, but it'll do in a pinch. Now, on top of that, main compartment of this pack, we have one of the most important things you can have: water. Now this is something I just grabbed out of the house, but this is fairly representative of what most people have laying around or even carry with you on a daily basis. Now this will carry, how much does this carry? Let's see, 64 ounces of water. Now that's not really a lot when you can think about what you're going to be doing during a zombie apocalypse. After all, this time of year, you're going to be running around with significant weight on your back, you're going to be running, you're going to be stressed, you're going to be dehydrating yourself fairly quickly like I've been doing today. So 64 ounces isn't ideal. I mean, that's just over half to 3/4 of a gallon. Now, a lot of people recommend that you should have a gallon of water per day per person, depending on your energy level. Or not your energy level, but your level of exertion, let's put it that way. That's a pretty good standard. Now, if you're going to be running around in a stressful situation, like a zombie apocalypse, I would recommend having some more. A couple good things to remember whenever it comes to that. Water purification tablets, water purification tools. If you can make your own filter, awesome, you're golden. Life straws. Life straws are an absolute must. I can go into this pond over here behind camera, and I can stick a life straw in there, take a sip, and I am right as rain. You can drink water just about anywhere in the world. Now, the next thing I have in here, since this is my car kit, jumper cables. These will be very, very useful in a zombie apocalypse because, let's go back to Walking Dead. What's one of the things that the gang is always looking for? A vehicle. What do they always find? Vehicles with dead batteries. Now, if you can find a live battery, which is going to be kind of a chore in and of itself in a Z-Poc, but if you're in those early seasons and the cars still work, these can be a godsend. Moving on from there, spare clothes wrapped in a poncho. I'm not going to undo all this. It's just basically a set of camis. There's a set of underwear in here. There's two extra pairs of socks. Also, it's wrapped in this camouflage poncho, and there's a whoopee in here. That is an absolute essential. Because, yeah, the weather's nice right now, but if I'm going to be out here for weeks on end, I don't know what kind of weather I'm going to run into. Also, when I bed down for the night, you want an insulating layer of some kind to separate you from the ground so that way your body heat doesn't get sapped out of you by that cold ground. So, absolute must. Moving on. Oh, actually, there's the socks I talked about. Secondary compartment. Zip ties. Ask any mechanic, ask any craftsman, ask anybody who has done any kind of crafting or any kind of DIY stuff. When do you not need zip ties? You can tie things down with this, you can use these for trail markers, you can sort of repair clothing with this, you can repair gear with this. 1,000,001 uses, gotta have them. Life straw, as I just mentioned. Now I forget exactly how many of these are good for. I believe these will filter about 10,000 gallons of water. I could be wrong, someone correct me. Basically the way they work is you pop this little cap off, you stick this end in the water, pull this end off, and it's just like a giant soda straw. You just dip this in the water, suck the water through, and there's all kinds of filters in here that will filter out 99.9% of microbes and bacteria. Sounds like an ad, sounds like a shameless plug. It is not. I have used these in all kinds of conditions. I've used these in the desert, I've used these in the woods, I've used these in the mountains. They just flat out work. They give these things to kids in Africa where the water is just absolutely horrendous, and they've never had a complaint. In fact, in a lot of movies or a lot of TV shows, you see those little blue things the kids are wearing around their necks. That's these. Oh, also, quick note on life straws. Another thing that they sell, aside from these, they also make filters that will go on like a water bladder, or they even make filters you can put on your water bottles. That is an absolute must as well if you can get your hands on those and store them properly. Because if you can just go to any old water source, like this cow pond over here, you have an infinite supply of water. Yes, you want to carry good water on your back at all times, but if you have a constant source of resupply, you're golden. Let's see, what else we got in here? Chem lights. Again, cheapo Walmart stuff. Cheap as you can get, but they work. Snap one of these in the dark, you can mark a position, you can mark a campsite, you can mark someplace you've already cleared. Just simple illumination when you need it. Food. Now you'll notice that I have a lot of supplies from Walmart in here. That's because this stuff is cheap, it's easily available, and in the case of this stuff, it is light. Now you can get your MREs, you can get your emergency rations, things like that, but these guys are just an absolute must for any kind of packer, or in this case, a survival situation. These have, let's see, 2,400 calories. That's about 2 days worth if you're really condensing your dietary discipline. Also, look at the size of that. Vacuum packed, hermetically sealed, tight and compact. This doesn't take up a whole lot of room in a pack, and it weighs 18 ounces. That's right at a pound, or actually just over a pound. 5-year shelf life. These are about 3 years old. They're probably due to be replaced. But guys, this could keep you going for a couple of days. Emergency food is something that you never want to dip into unless it is an absolute emergency. There's nothing else left. Now, in the case of the woods, especially in the spring or the summer when everything is in full bloom and the wildlife is just a rockin', I probably would not touch these for a few weeks because there would be edible plants, there'd be edible animals, there'd be supplies laying around. And since it's a zombie apocalypse, everything has just been abandoned. I could go to, let's say, one of those traffic jams that they saw in episode 1 of season 2. I could get supplies there. I could go into abandoned buildings. I could go into abandoned supermarkets, although that would be a little iffy. You can find supplies before you have to dip into your emergency food. But if you're going to carry it, I highly recommend something similar to this because it's just over a pound, guys. I mean, if you're going to waste a pound of something to put into your pack, food it's one of those essentials. It's the essentials of life. You can live, I think it's 3 months without food. But again, after about that first month, you're useless. The last 2 months, you're absolutely hating life. You are no good to anybody. Gotta keep yourself energized, guys. And is there anything else in there? Nope, that's it for that pocket. So, moving on to this bottom pocket down here. Now, the outer pockets is usually stuff that you want to get to right away. It's going to be something you're going to use daily or semi-daily. In this case, we have do-rag. Always good uses for those. Hand warmers. Gotta have those hand warmers, especially for certain times of the year. Like I said, it gets very chilly in the mornings and very chilly in the evenings this time of year, and it's gonna get worse. You gotta have a way to keep yourself warm any way you can. And these aren't just for hands, guys. Trust me, as a lifelong Ozarks hunter, I have become very, very inventive in my use of hand warmers. Once you pop one of these things on and it starts heating up, yes, you can tuck them into your hands like you're supposed to. You can also put them inside your shirt to keep your body heat up. You can put them in your boots to keep your feet warm. I've even known a guy to put it under his hat to keep his head warm. Lots of different uses for that. Lighter, obvious reasons. This is actually the third fire starting tool I have in here. You gotta have that redundancy. This is gonna sound a little silly, but it's very, very good to have. Dryer lint. We've all heard the stories about dryer lint catching houses on fire whenever the dryer overheats, or that catches a spark, something happens, this stuff catches on fire. It is highly, highly flammable. If you can carry around a couple bundles of this and keep it dry, this is instant kindling. I have started campfires in pouring rain with this stuff. Keep it handy. And it's free. Every time you empty your lint liner or your lint filter out of your dryer, instant kindling. Multi-tool. I keep this in the case just so I don't lose it. I have one on my belt, but it's always good to have redundancy. You gotta have as many tools as possible, and if you can, as many different types of multi-tool as you can. What else I got? Set of Allen keys for weapon and tool repair. Magnesium block. This is another fire starting method. You take your knife, take a couple shavings off of this block, use the spine of your blade to hit that striker, you get a nice little spark, flares right up. Also, second pocket knife. Knives are an absolute essential when it comes to a zombie apocalypse situation or any kind of survival situation. You can never have enough knives. This is the simplest and most basic tool known to man. If you look at the oldest tools ever made that have ever been discovered by archaeologists, what's the one thing they always mention? Knives or some kind of blade. Guys, if there's one thing, if you only have one thing in your survival pack, get a good knife. Like a really good quality knife. It will literally save your life. See what else I got here. Spare batteries. I talked about those in the weapons video. And thought I had a commando roll of tape in here, but I guess I don't. Now I gotta stick all this back in the pack. One second. Okay, and going up to what I like to call the daily pocket. Most good packs have this. It's gonna be, on my leg there. It's gonna be this little pocket up here on the top of the pack. This is stuff that you are going to use every day, probably several times a day, so you want to keep essentials in here. And what I've got in here is, of course, more dryer lint. What I just showed you a second ago is actually my secondary supply. This would be my primary supply. Matches. Again, Walmart purchase. This is a waterproof case for windproof matches. It has a striker here on the side. You can put any old matches in here. I love that it has this fluorescent orange color because it's a lot harder to lose. I have lost stuff like this so many times, and it's just a pain in the ass when you do. So, good thing to have. Even more dryer lint. And a Bear Grylls survival kit. Again, guys, this is not a go to hell bag. This is not a bug out bag. This is my simple get home car bag, something nice and simple. But even this has simple tools that will keep you alive in a pinch. As you can see, it's got cordage, survival blanket, striker. There's a flint and steel in there. There's some signaling equipment. There's a whistle. Really good things to have in a nice, brightly colored case so you don't lose it. Because when you're out in the woods, guys, it is incredibly easy to lose things. Especially if you're in a hurry and especially if you're stressed. And again, I mentioned it before, map square. Navigation, navigation, navigation. If you don't know where you're going and you don't know how to read a map, you are screwed and you are just wandering around aimlessly. Between this and the compass in my pocket, if I got a good map, I can find my way in the world no matter where I am or how many zombies happen to be wandering it. Okay, I'm going to correct myself here. Something that just occurred to me as I was putting all this stuff back in this pack. I've mentioned medical 101 times in this and other videos, and you may have noticed that there is no medical actually in this pack at this time. Reason for that is since this is my car bag, I actually have a full medical kit in my car, and it's a rip-off, so I can literally just rip it off the Velcro. It's attached to some MOLLE panels on the back of the seat of my car, and there is space in this pack for me to stuff that thing in here. So I do have medical to hand, and so should you. It's not in this pack at this time, something I should probably fix. I'm sure y'all are going to rip me about that in the comments. Just wanted to add that in, put in a little clarification. to add on to everything I just said, we have talked about gear, we have talked about what to have in your pack, we've talked about the supplies and the gear that you have to, or not have to have, but you should have in order to conceivably survive at least the first couple of seasons of The Walking Dead. Another thing to talk about is your secondary weapons. Now, we talked in depth about the rifle. We got a full video on that, which I'll link in the description below. So we've covered the rifle. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but you should have a rifle or something similar, some kind of very good, very reliable, very capable primary weapon system, because this is going to be your life's blood when it comes to fighting off zombies, saviors, hostile actors, putting food on the table, whatever. You need a good rifle or a good primary. But in addition to that, we all know that Mr. Murphy is going to come calling, and he does get a say in what happens on any given day. So in addition to your primary weapon, your rifle, shotgun, what have you, you should have a decent secondary and tertiary weapon system as well. Now, for most people, a secondary means a handgun. And yes, I know, as much as I love the 1911, it is my most beloved, my personal favorite platform for a pistol, not so good in a zombie apocalypse. Because unfortunately, as much as it's won 2 world wars and it's still kicking after 100, actually, yeah, just over 100 years, come to think of it. Wow. Timeless classic, I guess. And actually, these have been updated into the 2011, which is a different animal. It's a 9mm double stack. But for the classic examples like this, it's a 45 ACP and it only has a capacity of about 8 rounds. That's the standard, usually the standard 1911 mag capacity. That's what this holds. So 8 rounds in a mag. I've got 8, 16, 24. Actually, no, I've got 30 rounds of 45 on my person right now. So that's a decent amount of ammo. But compared to a lot of modern double-stack 9mm handguns, unfortunately, my old girl doesn't really compete, because you got stuff like the P320 that can actually hold 20 or 30 round magazines. You got the FN57 that I think does hold a 30 round magazine, and of course you got your standard, oh geez, there's a plethora. There's Glock, SIG, Walther, there's Springfield Armory, all these companies out there that make your standard double stack daily carry 9mm handgun, which are usually double stack and usually have a capacity of between 10, 17, maybe even up to 20 rounds. Now, if you have multiple magazines for those, you can hold a lot of ammo. In fact, your pistol ammo capacity can rival or even exceed your rifle capacity. In fact, on that note, I have met a lot of people whose primary weapon is actually a pistol caliber carbine that accepts Glock magazines and can also go into their handgun. That is something to consider, because if you are just fighting zombies, if this is purely a zombie apocalypse, you're not fighting hostile humans yet, 9mm is a deadly cartridge inside of, let's say, about 50 yards, especially if you get the good hollow points or the good self-defense ammo. So if you've got a rifle-sized package or even a carbine-sized package with decent optics, sling, light, all the things that you need on a good fighting rifle, you can just whack and stack zombies all day long, and you have an almost infinite supply of ammo, because literally everybody carries a 9mm these days. So, handgun, it's definitely something to consider. And also, I'll add, this is a bare bones basic handgun package. All I have is iron sights, no accoutrements, no lights, no lasers. Really, I could get an extended magazine in here, but I'm not gonna, because it messes up the lines. This is your granddaddy's pistol. These days, pistols have so many options. I mean, there are models coming out today that are already fitted for red dots. Most of them come with a piece of pick rail up front, so you can put lasers, lights, really whatever you want. You can get compensators, you can get suppressors. Suppressors are a good idea. I talked about this in the rifle video, but for a handgun, especially something like this is a 45 ACP. It is a subsonic round. What did I say about subsonic rifle ammo? It is mouse fart quiet with a suppressor. Because since it's not breaking the sound barrier, there's no secondary crack after the suppression of the actual gun shot. 45 is ultra quiet. I've shot it under a suppressor, and it is pretty much perfect for nighttime operations or a zombie apocalypse. But unfortunately, not a lot of 45 caliber handguns on the market today besides the 1911, maybe the FN Tactical, but that's kind of fallen out of style. For 9mm, however, suppressors work really, really well. You still get that crack, that little bitty pop, but it's really kind of like a 22 LR going off. There's not a whole lot going on there. But sidearm, definitely something to think about, and if you want to put all the doodads on there and you have a good supply of batteries, we talked about this in the rifle video, go ahead and throw an optic and a light on there. Anything that gives you an advantage, anything that gives you the maximum amount of capability, be it with zombies, an active shooter, civil unrest, Russian invasion, whatever, anything that gives you the maximum amount of potential, the maximum amount of advantage, do it. If you're fighting fair guys, you're doing it wrong and you're probably losing. Now, I talked about a tertiary weapon system. This is something not a lot of people think about, because you have your primary, your secondary. Well, what's a tertiary? Tertiary is your last-ditch weapon, or something that you wouldn't normally use as a weapon. Sometimes it's more of a tool, but it can be a weapon if your primary and secondary either go down, run out of ammo, what have you. That's almost always a good knife. You saw this in my rifle video, but this is a Gerber Strong Arm, I don't know if you'd call it a tactical knife, but it's a Gerber Strong Arm fixed blade knife. This is one of the best knives I've ever owned. Between this and Buck, it's kind of a dead heat for the best best knife I've ever owned. Now, you know, I mentioned it's a fixed blade. Fixed blades are an absolute must for a survival situation. Folders are good, but fixed blades are king. These things are tough, they are rugged. You can chop a tree down, you can skin a buck, or you can stab a zombie in the head with one of these, and it will just keep on going strong. And as long as you don't really excessively abuse it, they will not wear out. They will last as long as you do, if not longer. I've got knives that belong to my great-grandpa, and they are still going strong as long as I keep that knife or that edge honed. That's the next thing. I had a little knife sharpener in my pack. I don't know if I pulled it out for you, but if you can keep this blade nice and sharp, it will outlast you. Plus, you can see I got a little serrated edge on there. That's for little camp chores like cutting cordage, cutting kindling, things like that. Yeah, you could try to saw through wood with that, but it's not a good idea. You're just going to ruin the teeth. But also, this knife is more than capable. I love the grip on this thing. You can hold it overhand, underhand. You can do slicing motions, stabbing motions. You can do the buoy hold. All kinds of different ways you can use this knife. It even has a glass breaker on the end of it for whenever you're trying to salvage out of those abandoned cars or free yourself from say a vehicle CQB situation. Knives are an absolute must. Also, these are your last-ditch weapon. Let's say you're in a town, you're out, or maybe out in the woods, something managed to sneak up on me. For whatever reason, I am pinned up. There's a zombie in my face, or there's a bad guy in my face, whatever the case may be. I can't use my rifle, and for some reason I can't get to my pistol. Maybe it's pinned against a wall, but I cannot get to my primary weapons. If I can reach back here and get my hands on my knife, well, I just saved my own life, possibly the lives of the people around me, the people I love, the people I care about. All because I had the foresight to have a good tertiary weapon system that won't let me down when anything else is out of reach. So guys, when it comes to your zombie weapons, think it through. And you can have any kind of combination. I mean, like I said before, it's all personal preference. You can have an AR-15, a tricked out SIG or Glock or what have you, and you can have a machete or a tomahawk or whatever you want on your back. What's that one guy, big black guy from Walking Dead? I think his name's Tyrese, I want to say. The guy walked around with a carpenter's belt, had a big-ass hammer in his hand. I mean, I used to call him Black Thor, just as kind of a joke. But that guy did very well, and a hammer is actually a pretty good option for a zombie apocalypse, because if all you're doing is trying to crack skulls and crush brains, that's literally what a hammer does. It breaks things. It drives nails. It's a tool and a weapon. So there you go. I'm going off on a tangent. I don't care. But like I said, guys, when it comes to your overall weapon selection, good primary, decent secondary, good tertiary. Because when it comes to life and death, you can't skimp. Well, that about wraps it up, guys. I don't know about y'all, but I'm ready to head back to camp for some squirrel and chicory and live to fight another day. Y'all take care out there. Stay alert, stay alive, and stay frosty, my friends.